Mr. Cantrell.
Oh, I assumed it was A for Andy.
Oh yeah,
Well, yeah,
Andy.
I was going to ask if it was first name or last name, but go ahead, Dan.
Oh, man, the instructions are too complicated.
I'm so sorry. I must be a tech or something. Something wrong with me.
Good afternoon. My name is Dan Cantrell. I work at Duke University Health System as a director of IT. We're just introducing ourselves. I've been here for 13 years. I love living in the Raleigh area. Really great place to raise a family. Very happy about that. Yeah.
Thank you. Karen?
I am Karen Collins. I'm a software engineer for Duke University's Identity Management Group. I learned how to code from a library book called Teach Yourself C back in the 90s and just became fanatically interested in it. Went back to college for a BS in computer science, and I've been a software developer ever since.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Andy?
Andy Ingham, also obviously, I guess, of OIT, research computing specifically, but also work pretty closely with the IT security office. I've worked at Duke since 2011 and was at the Fuqua School of Business up until 2015 when I joined OIT.
Excellent. Thank you. Drew?
My name is Drew Stinnett. I work for OIT. I've been here for like 10 or 11 years, I guess, roughly, mostly doing System Z Linux stuff. I come from a theater background, so that's very fun, but I also like computers, and I love horror movies.
Ooh, thank you, Drew. Thank you all for joining me today. If it's not obvious, we are all Dukies of some sort. I'm not exactly sure what all kinds of sorts, but we're all techies and Dukies. That's what we all have in common. So I'm going to start by asking you, and I'm going to just ask the question. You can answer in whatever order you wish to. How do you define diversity?
I can start. I was going to say that for me, diversity is representation across all different sorts of criteria or attributes. And so oftentimes we think of it in terms of racial diversity, but obviously, gender identity, sexual orientation, nationality, religion, it could be any number of different things. And it sort of comes down to casting a wide net, if you would.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll jump in. I think, that's all very accurate. I think diversity, when I think about that word, I think, what is diversity? It's having variety. And, I think I've always had a positive outlook towards people. And I always look for the uniqueness in people. And I think diversity is very much tied to our being unique. I mean, every individual on this planet shares in common, I think they say like 99.99% of our DNA is identical. But what makes us unique? I would hate to live in a world where we only had electric blue cars. I like them, but I'm sure a lot of people don't. So
are we going to get a ride in that electric blue car when we're past COVID,
Oh, I hope so.
Exactly.
I would agree with that. I think diversity comes in a lot of different dimensions, age and origin, point of view. Traditionally, I guess I have thought about diversity in terms of people who are underrepresented in an area. Like I would think I bring diversity to tech because there aren't that many women here, but I've kind of learned there's a lot more dimensions of diversity than that, and that people who are very highly represented are also bringing their diversity. They also have their very different points of view and are bringing those diverse points of view to the table, even if they're someone who looks like Mark Zuckerberg in tech, as well as those of us that don't.
Thank you.
I agree with everything everybody else has said, obviously. What I sort of think about when I think of diversity nowadays is, I would say before 2020, I thought of diversity as like, don't be racist, give everybody a shot. And now I feel like diversity is what we need to do to keep a diverse culture is to actually be more proactive about seeking diversity out like every day. Like just saying, hey, I'm not racist is not enough to make like a comfortable work environment and comfortable living environment for everybody. We need to be doing we as like I say as like a non-diverse white dude, we need to be like doing a better job of making sure people feel comfortable, and not being racist isn't enough.
I would say even those words, I am not racist, is racist, right?
Yeah.
So because why are you identifying that as the old thing is, I have Black friends. What does that statement mean? It's kind of really infuriating when you think about it for someone to say that to you. But to me, my definition of diversity is kind of touches on something all four of you said. So first of all, I think it's first diversity of actions. So the things that you do in your daily life, whether you're work or you're at play or whatever you're doing, you are doing things that is broader than the whole of you. So you're not just, if you are a volleyball player, you're not playing volleyball every single day. You are may go take a shot at baseball or some other kind of sport, to have diverse actions. I think it's diverse ideas. And I will tell you a perfect example of that is Dan Cantrell and I. So I have known Dan longer than I've known any one of you except for Vernon. And Dan and I have such a wonderful relationship. And I always call him my little brother because it is just like my little brother. We don't think alike. We don't share the same ideas. We have different ideologies about various things, but we have a wonderful relationship that withstands all the craziness that makes us who we are and the things that the environment throws at us. And then, diversity of persons is very, very important, whether they be ethnicity, religion, or sexual orientation, whatever it is, that's very important. But I also say experienced person. So we need someone that's inexperienced to someone who's very experienced. So those kinds of persons. And then thoughts. So like, and I'll just throw my Google fascination with biometrics out there, so when they come up with facial recognition software in 2015, they hadn't had a diverse team. And the first thing you see is a gorilla when you see someone my complexion. So I mean, you got to have people who are thinking differently. You got to have people who bring different visions and views of the world into the space if you're going to be productive, because we all know Google did not intend to do that. That was not good businesses. So they didn't do it intentionally. It's just, we're just thinking inside our little narrow box, and it just fits very nicely for us. So I thank you all for your definition of diversity. And I think they all have a place. And I think as long as we're recrafting our definitions of diversity every day, we are on the right track, I think.
Well, I would just add sort of to what Drew was saying and also what you were just saying, that that's exactly why being proactive is so important, because otherwise you don't know what you don't know, and your blind spots are blind spots for a reason. And so if you don't proactively engage with a wide variety of folks on all the different spectrums, you're never going to understand what those blind spots are. And that's exactly what happened to Google in that example.
Exactly. I agree.
That's
So
a really good point.
go ahead, Karen.
Oh, I was just saying that's a really good point. I've read a lot of stories of things like that, of, the crash test dummies that really were sort of designed for a man of an average height and weight, that maybe don't tell you a lot about safety for smaller people or children. There's lots of stories like that. Gym equipment used to be designed that way too. It was for the average person. And in AI, we look at a lot of bell curve, a lot of things that fall in the majority and have some blind sides in tech, I guess, due to that.
I think one of the interesting pieces of this, if you know me well, my son is a gamer. He's nationally ranked, and they just recently, Sony and Twitch and Facebook just recently had some kind of internal, with their top rated players discussion about gaming tools are designed for men. They're designed for the hands and the way men use their fingers and, are able to be more agile in a lot of ways than women are. And I don't know if that's true, but that's what the literature says. So I think that your point, Karen, is a very, very good point. There are lots of things that are not necessarily designed diversely. So my second question to you all is, what is the implication of the lack of or inclusivity in technology?
Well, I think you just touched on a few of them actually, and video games is an excellent example of where there hasn't been good diversity in directing the market. You know, for how many, well, most of the life of video games, the market has been dominated predominantly by male gamers, and to the detriment of females. And it's so clear when you look at it, and you ask somebody who is not a male gamer who might have helped develop the game, what's missing here? What is turning you off from this game? What is it that you look for in an entertainment piece of software? And to the detriment of the gaming community, because they missed a huge market share, half the population. Not actually half, but why wouldn't you want to give entertainment to everybody? So it wasn't necessarily intended in the first place, but it was definitely self-defeating.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, as technology really rises as a field, some people really get left behind if there's not a welcome space for them, because a lot of jobs are going away and jobs are becoming more technical over time. They really are. And this field did kind of over the years have a very small footprint of who was really welcome, especially to be a leader and to rise and be at the top in this field. And I don't think that'll even be sustainable going forward, as many technical people as we're going to need.
I would just add to that baby boomers are still dying. I think it's now 7.5 a day. I think COVID advanced that. And STEM specifically is laden with baby boomers. There are a lot of new generations, but the majority of the people who drive and innovate in STEM are baby boomers.
I was going to say that there's essentially, in addition to the blind spots, there's the opportunity cost that's lost. And I think Dan and Karen both sort of mentioned that, there's this vast untapped potential. And when entire segments are sort of left completely out, there's just a huge amount of opportunity lost, both for them and for sort of the greater good, right? So that was my main point, was sort of the opportunity cost in addition to, the blind spots.
Yeah, I sort of see that as well with when you have a lot of people that are, the same and coming from the same background. Sometimes technology can turn into an echo chamber where everybody's using the same thing, everybody's reinforcing each other, and then getting something new or getting a diverse opinion in can really like shake things up for the better, and introduce new tools, and having more, not just diverse people but diverse tools, I think overall helps in technology, because everything has pluses and minuses. Some things go away, and if you're stuck using that OS that all of a sudden goes away, and that's the only thing you'd ever use for the last 20 years because no one ever introduced anything new in, that's like bad all over.
Absolutely.
Well, and I'll say that the advantage and disadvantages also are very pronounced in other ways. There was a report recently about skin light sensing heart rate monitors, and they couldn't work properly if you had a skin tone that was too dark for what it was able to pick up. So you think about the downstream disadvantages of not being able to wear a smart sensor that can alert you of your possible death. Think about having somebody die when earlier than they needed to, if there would have been an advanced warning system that was capable of working on 60% of the people in the world, but those other 40% are disadvantaged based on the color of their skin. I mean, there are huge downstream ramifications to these for certain technologies, and ever growing in impact as technology becomes pervasive in every part of our lives.
Absolutely.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, I think that some of it also is that it perpetuates ideas whose time have really passed, right? And if the only people you ever see in some environment or some position look a certain way, then it drives home this notion that that's the way you're supposed to look, or that's how you're supposed to be, for no other reason than it's just what is available, what people see, which is truly unfortunate. And I mean, I think today, obviously, Inauguration Day is that's a big part of today, is the fact that we're getting to see, particularly in the vice president, you know, something new, which is critically important for killing off ideas of, you know, who should be fully American, or who should be in a position of trust, or all those sorts of things, those ideas whose time is just well past. And I would have thought, it's been eye-opening for me over the past few years, I would have thought we had put those to bed before. And I've heard it said, Rochelle, from you, is among others, that, you know, it's nothing new to see that from your perspective, right? But for me, much like Drew, you know, your average white dude, we don't experience that on a daily basis. It's been eye-opening.
And I think that one of the interesting things I wrote on LinkedIn on Martin Luther King Day, or at least what is acknowledged as his day, you know, he said that he dreams of a time when his 4 little children can be judged by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. And here we are in 2021, in which skin really does matter. If you listen to any of the chats I've done in the last few days, yesterday I did a chat with a woman by the name of Sarah Rami. I mean, I think I got that right, Rami. And she is from Palestine, and she and her family have lived in the United States for almost all of her life. And she was talking about moving into a place where people outspokenly said, you know, woman's walking her dog and tells her dog not to go near her because she's not like them, you know, or to hear your children in school being chastised because they're practicing Ramadan, you know, like you have to eat lunch now, you know, where they're doing something. And that we still struggle with race in such a large way. And to me, and my narrow little thoughts, I am so sick of the word diversity, equity, inclusion, because they mean nothing. You know, if you aren't doing something, stop talking, because it doesn't help us. And I'm speaking strictly to Black women. It doesn't help us to hear people talk about this over and over and over and over and over again. We know it. We see it. We see how our Black men are killed. We see how we are economically. We see all the challenges and struggles we have with our children in school. You know, do something. Do something. Slavery would not have ended if white people had not done something. And I'm sure they talked about it for a long time before they did something, but they eventually did something. And we've been talking about diversity for a long time. We need to do something. And we need people who are consciously thinking about it, not just saying, well, you know, wow, I can't believe they murdered that man like that, you know, or something like that. Yes, that's unnerving, but there's way worse. I mean, many of you heard of James Byrd in Texas. They tied a rope around his neck and drug him to the back of a pickup truck down a dirt road till his neck and head separated from his body. I mean, that's pretty awful, you know, and we don't know why yet. Black people disappear all the time and no one knows where they are. These are all things that are out there. But the work we have to do is a lot, and it should be less talking and more doing. And so I'm gonna stop talking, but I do have another question. So this is a kink question, if you will. I'm throwing a kink into the mix. You have power, and we'll translate power to $1 billion. You have $1 billion. And here come all these people wanting some of your $1 billion. What's your likely response and why?
That's hard. I mean, I guess like honestly, like when I think of $1 billion, the first thing I think of is, oh Lord, I've got to like protect some of it. What if something happens, right? And that's not really the best thing to do, but that's my initial reaction, and it's probably the reaction of a lot of people. But that doesn't help anybody.
Well, I mean, I think that's a very American idea, right? This notion that we're all in competition with each other, and it's all about accruing as much as you can, and you know, everyone else be damned sort of point of view. So, right? But and I think there's some sense of almost weakness that's assigned to the common good or the greater good, or wanting to share the wealth, or right,
Hmm.
or you know, what tax benefit do I get from this? Not so much how am I helping a situation, but rather, again, what's in it for me? um that is a very tough question.
But that literally is what diversity is. You know, so you have been, and I'm not talking to you specifically, but a specific group has been in power for a very, very long time. And here comes the masses. So whether they're black, brown, green, or orange, female, you know, gay, whatever it is that they are, and they're coming at you, asking you to share your power with them. Let us play too. And the old adage I used to hear when I was little, the boy who dies with the most toys win. I don't even know what that means, but that's what I used to hear when I was little. You know, so you literally are asking people to give something that they fought for, they believe in, they need, like Drew said, to protect it for the future, you know, and look out for their kids and in the college. And here come all these people now saying, hey, I want some. And that's literally the diversity action question, right? So are you willing to share what you have without it negatively impacting you, your family, or your well-being?
Well,
And so
didn't mean to interrupt. I was just going to say that the amount of money that you mentioned there, billion, right?
just
it-
a definition for power. You know, you got $1 billion, you're a pretty powerful person.
Right. Well, and I guess at a certain point, someone famously said that at a certain point, additional money no longer motivates. Right. At a certain point, you're so wealthy that it just doesn't even matter how much wealthier you are, and the number that you picked strikes me as being at that level. Right.
But
And
we're
so,
not. It's not literal. It's not a literal term. It is literally it's just the word power. It's
right.
just more recognizable word for power. Not the dollar at all. It could have been 50 cents if that's how you view power.
Right. Well, I think in the case of sort of what I was getting at with that is that it is possible to share the wealth without any real detriment to you, right? Because you could still be incredibly comfortable, even if you know, you sort of lopped off whatever was over X amount, right? And it is difficult to equate something that is very uh, specific in terms of dollar amounts with something that's a little more amorphous, like power, right? Because power is reflected in all sorts of different ways. A lot of it is monetary for sure, right? But there is some trick of trying to associate those two different things.
I think if you look at the analogy of it, it's simply this. I have this, whatever this is. You can put it in any category you want to. Money has often been the easiest way to justify this analogy. But you just think about this. I've got this. And all of a sudden, here comes everybody who wants some. And trick or treat might be a very good example about this. You put out a bucket of candy and, you know, kids come knock on your door and you tell them you can only take one or two. Why? You know, why can't they only take one or two? Can't they just take a whole handful? Can't they just take the whole bucket? Well, you know, there's some thought about fairness. There's some sort of thoughts about other people having access to it or all that stuff. But when it comes to how we see each other, and one of the other chats I had yesterday, you got to listen to too. It's a woman, she lives in Dubai, but she's from India. And she talks about the resentment of girl children. Like they don't want girl children to be born and all the efforts they take to minimize the possibility of girl children. It's the same story, no matter where you tell it. It's the same story that I don't want to share what I have because I don't know what the amount is to lop off. Like Andy said, what amount is that I lop off? You know, so if I have a house full of girls, well, this means I have to give out a lot of money for endowments. You know, I have to pay for a lot of weddings and stuff. What is the argument why a girl child would be any less valuable than a boy child? Why is the argument that a Black person is any less valuable than a white person? Why do these things exist? And if they are such amorphous, as you said, Andy, why is it that we hold so tight to it and we are unwilling to share or to bring or advocate for others?
That's a really good question. And I mean, that this is probably easy to say and hard to understand how to live, but I think there is some truth in the idea that power corrupts. And I believe really strongly that there is a loss of having that $1 billion to yourself when you got it in an unfair way. When you have power in an unfair way, you're standing on low moral ground. I think white people are born on low moral ground because of history. And
that's deep, Karen.
And there is a loss. There is a big loss to having that power.
Yeah.
I'd like to say also that I think, you know, when you talk about, I think when you look at somebody and how they act when they are asked to share power, I think it reflects on their internal soul, their internal thinking. Are they truly believing that somebody would share power with them? Isn't it really, their actions are really a reflection on how they feel? They don't want to share power with somebody because they feel no one would share that with them because that would be wrong. So it's almost as if they are reflecting back, well, I would never want to share power, so nobody else should. And I should fear that. I should always, you know, thwart that because that's not right. You know, and you're reflecting out your own internal beliefs in that case.
I think I'm also a bit conceited. I think I could win on a fair playing ground because I think I'm an amazing software developer. There are certain things I'm terrible at doing, but I think I could be successful in the things I passionately love. But when I win as much as I have won, but there are other people that weren't playing on a fair playing ground, what have I really won? You know, how much is it really worth?
Drew, you didn't say anything. Did we didn't give you a window?
No, it's fine. One of the things that a lot of times I think about with like that amount of power is like, personally, I wouldn't want it. Like you always, we have discussions over here a lot about like Mark Zuckerberg and like he's constantly in the press and he's constantly like doing these awful things and like he has more money than he could ever need. Like, why does he keep doing it? Like, why not just step out and let somebody else take that pain? Like, because you know, with all that power comes a lot of responsibility, like in the superhero stuff, and it's it must be very hard, and like you said, Karen, like it must be corrupting as well because people cannot let it go.
I've got to say something though. Today of all days, there is always hope. Think about I don't know, I'm older. A while back, we said those exact same things about a Mr. Bill Gates. And what has he done with his life since? Pretty amazing things.
That's a good point.
So
Yeah.
I think there's always hope. I think you always have to keep
model. But he's a model of what to do with a lot of money and power for sure.
Well,
Yeah.
with advantage.
I still think
He has opportunity and advantage, and he has found a way to share that. And it's not detrimental. It seems genuine at this point. I mean, so, but when we talk about diversity, do we have diverse role models of this sort of giving and selflessness?
Let me just interrupt you for 1 second, Dan. I know I hate to do that, but I mean, I think first of all, I don't want this to be literal. This is not about wealth or accumulation. It's not. It's not. You know, you could have $1 trillion. You could, you know, rule the world. I see every day there's something that comes out on the Forbes of who's the richest man in the world. Whoever that is, good luck. But when we're talking about something so simple, and you can look at it in the very simplest ways, right? So we had the Holocaust, we had Japanese internment camps, we had the Trail of Tears. All of these things were done with some righteous belief that they were doing the right thing, right? So colonists and people who came here from England wanting a better way of life saw the Native Americans as heathens and, barbarians. So if they didn't adapt to their religion, they must be no good. So let's drive them away. You've got the internment camps where Hiroshima drops a bomb. The United States then rounds up all the Japanese and put them in camps, and you've got, numerous examples of where power sharing in the most basic way, being human, is constantly called into question. I cannot, and I'll do it in a space where all four of you are experts. How many Black or brown CIOs do you know? And when I say Black and brown, Black, Latino, Hispanic, Indian, whatever ethnicity you can find, how many do you know? And I will tell you, I know the answer to this question, but how many do you know?
I've seen a handful at diversity events like Grace Hopper.
So
Yeah, I mean, the answer is definitely 0 for me. But to be fair, I'm not sure I know that many CIOs, but it is absolutely true that that there isn't much diversity there. I feel pretty confident in saying that. One thing I wanted to say in relation to what Dan had said, he used the word fear in his response. And I actually think, in addition to arrogance, which is sort of, Rochelle, what you were getting at in terms of the examples that you were listing, sort of, we know better, and this needs to be this way because we know better, that sort of arrogance angle. I think that fear plays a big role in it, and has in a lot of situations like this, the fear of the other, whatever the other is, right? And this notion of sharing power with the other, or giving away some of what you have, even if you would still be perfectly comfortable with that incrementally less amount, it's not so much that as just this innate fear that of what might happen, or what power would do in other people's hands, right? And the outgoing president is a perfect example of, playing to people's fears, purposely playing to people's fears. And you can see that it's very effective, right? There's a long history of that in America. Long.
I think Dan said something that's pretty powerful. The first thing he said, 99% of our DNA, 99%, that's not a little number, because the other numbers are tiny. 99% we share in common. Now, you can look at me, I have old gray coarse hair, have thick lips, thick nose, little ears, brown skin. Okay, so I think you know who I am. You don't have to guess. If you walk by me, you know I'm not white. You know I'm not white. But 99% of what we have in common, and I wish I could send you guys a picture. I did that Ancestry DNA. Somebody gave me one for Christmas. God help me. I got that back. So I am 31% white, whatever the hell that means. My ancestors are from Ireland, Portugal, London. I'm like, okay, where are all these places? You know what? So, and I'm sitting there looking at this thing and I'm thinking, yep, there's that 1 drop rule. And so when you are in power, when you have the power to grant life and death, to grant wellness and not wellness, all of these things, if we were truly comfortable with power, whatever that may mean to you, we would not have the number of COVID deaths we've had. We would not have as many people that are hungry and food insecure as we have. We would not have the number of people who are struggling that were once middle class, who lost their jobs, trying to fix it, because we would come to the rescue. I think I told Drew this the other day. I had a conversation with Dan many years ago about guns. And his idea is to let everybody have all the guns they want, just no ammunition. Do you remember that, Dan?
Yeah.
You remember telling me that? Right. So, what is the driving force that prevents us from being able to see what we have in common versus what we have different?
Is it just short-sightedness? Is it just people have a hard time seeing people different from them? Like, you spend your life with white people all day long for, all of your life, and now you're interacting with a non-white person. Like, is that such a big is that an issue for people? Like, is it just something different and people don't like change?
Well, I think that is part of it. I also think part of it is what we have seen also by virtue of all of the systemic racism that has accumulated over time, and that, you know, we see the remnants of, even from my perspective, which, you know, again, as a white dude, you know, it's a very specific perspective, but you know, I grew up in a small town in Virginia, and and in the 70s, early 80s, there was a black side of town, there was a white side of town, well known, and probably still to this day is the same way. And if that is your experience, then it can't help but have an imprint on you, right? And hopefully at some point you say to yourself, why is it like that? Why does it have to be like that? Or why was it ever like that? Or why is it still like that? Right? But the reality is, it that's what you experienced, right?
Okay, to our second question, thank you all very much for those responses. They're very good. Oh, I'm sorry, our third question. In your opinion, what area of technology is likely to be disrupted the most in how we live, play, and work?
I'll just throw it out there. I think digital communication has the greatest opportunity to change how we live, play, and work. You know, you think about you can now speak to anybody in the world in about 1 second. Well, not anybody in the world. You can speak to about 7 billion people in the world within a few seconds. There are still people who are disadvantaged and can't get access to the new technology, obviously. But being able to communicate with a diverse set of people on demand, and I think that we can find new technologies that are helping us do that even more effectively. Simply translation. I can speak to somebody, I can exchange ideas digitally with somebody who speaks a language I have never spoken. And if you take that forward with what they're doing with analyzing text and writings and communications, you can now infer intents. So you can enrich the communication between two people who before a few years ago could never have communicated in their lifetimes. So that's a huge advantage of technology that can help our entire civilization, our entire population. But it's not being doled out equally. There's a lot of people in this world who can't afford a device to use. And so they will never be able to experience that. There are a lot of people who don't have the safety and may not live past a young childhood age because they don't have clean drinking water. I mean, there's a lot of challenges to that wonderful utopia that we could create almost overnight with the tools that we've got, you know, sitting in the computers in front of us.
I would just say, be careful with that. And you are being, and I'm being a bit of devil's advocate here, but I think that there's a huge slice of the population worldwide that even if they had a device in front of them, there's no networking, there's no electricity, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And as you say, basic things like clean water, you know, sanitation, which, talk about taking things for granted. I mean, you know, we certainly take those things for granted, and it is true that you know, a large proportion of people don't even have those things, right? So yes, for many people, that connectivity is absolutely, you know, life changing. But as you say, a large proportion of people are sort of left out from that just because the basics aren't satisfied. I was going to say, I think that, and it's related to what you said, Dan, but just the Internet of Things, the fact that everything, it seems, is or can be connected. Some that seem to me to have no real valuable purpose in being connected, and what that means for data privacy, right? I think people are exposing themselves in ways that they have no comprehension of in terms of data about them, their movements, their locations, their contacts, who they associate with, all those sorts of things, that they're so focused in on having, everything connected, their light bulbs and their doorbells and all that stuff, that
Rioters
it's
filming
lost.
themselves committing crimes and publishing them publicly. I mean,
Well,
yeah,
it's
people don't understand the
mind-boggling.
technology.
It's
It is
mind-boggling.
mind-boggling.
That's sort of the thing that scares me about the way technology is going now, is all of the, like, just, I think it's the rabbit holes that people get down now, whether it's like Facebook or YouTube or Twitter. Like, when I go to one of those sites, I'm going to see something much different than somebody who searched for like 2 hours worth of QAnon stuff. And now like their feed is all QAnon all the time. And they think that that's like the reality. They think that, everybody's seeing that on their feed, and are surprised that it's not, everyone out there storming the Capitol building. And being able to somehow, like, I don't know what the right fix for that is, but I mean, I think it's just, don't keep promoting these echo chambers. But getting that out is,
you're stepping on free speech.
yeah. Or even, I mean, I would say, like, just make the speech more diverse. Like,
Yeah,
when
not in
people
a
are
private
thinking
company, it isn't.
You can't
Speech is
tell someone
only
how
assured by the government.
right. You can't tell someone what to say. You've got those little ground rules. You don't yell fire in a movie theater or someplace. But other than that, people can say whatever they want to say and even adhere to it and believe it, because that's a lot of the reason why we are even having this conversation, is because people believe that people that are not like them, they don't have blue eyes, they don't have brown or blonde stringy hair, came from the worst side of the Bible. The Cain and Abel, I can't think of the father goes into the room and supposedly has sex with his daughter, and thus you have Black people. There's some people who really believe that, and it's written in some odd way for that to be possible, that you could get that from the Bible and hold on to that's why we have differences between us, that we are Black and brown people are barbarians and not human, because we've done this inhuman thing, and so God has put a mark on us, and the mark is the color of our skin. That's insane to me, but there are people who believe that, and they're entitled to believe it. You should not challenge them to believe it. If you believe that's true, well.
Opinions are fine, but facts are facts.
Facts are facts.
This world behind me in the picture is round.
It's not. It's flat.
People's opinions.
It's flat. I heard that the other day. It was flat.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm done terrorizing you all, but I do want to leave you with one little thing that, so I did, I've gotten my certification like 6 times now in diversity. And one class I did was emotional intelligence in diversity. And it was a very interesting little play that they did. And so, you all probably have seen this, the Myers-Briggs thing, where you go through all these different things to find out what kind of person you are, whether you're, I'm an ISTJ, whatever that is. And, so whether you're that person or this person. So what they did is they came up with all these pictures, and all it was a shape of a head, and you had to put your face through it, but you had to have your back turned to your partner. And they said, the person behind you is coming to date your son or daughter. Without knowing anything about that person, how would you feel if you discovered they were not like you? I think there were about 100 and some people in my class. Almost all of them passed out. Okay, I'm being funny, but most of them were just shocked to know that without knowing, you said yes to your daughter or son, that he or she could marry this person that's not like you. So maybe Black, maybe gay, maybe from a different religion, and you just automatically said yes. So I leave you with this. So when you think about your own understanding of how diversity works in the world, so we talked a little bit about power, but I think Andy's point really does get home a little bit. So now it's your power. It's not overall, whoever that was, Dan said, has $1 billion, giving it away nicely. It's not that, but it's your power. And you can isolate it as much as you can, but your lovely youngin has come home with someone that you are not prepared for her or him to come home with. how do you work through that? Because if you can work on the other side of that and get to the place where you are comfortable with it. So, and I would just use Black, for example. I mean, so the way we live and play and work and do all these things is very different from other people in a lot of ways. So now on Thanksgiving, you're gonna have some fried chicken and collard greens, some black eyed peas and chitlins on your dinner table. Lord have mercy. That's your in-laws now, and your future across the hall in-laws. Mother has been cooking the chitlins for 3 days and they smell like death. And they want you to eat. Ooh, don't they smell good? Did you want to eat this? So you got these kind of things where all of a sudden your beautiful little child has brought home something you're not prepared for. Like, you know, the dog bringing you in a snake or a frog or something like that. This thing has come home and you're not prepared for it. How in the world do you make it going forward? And without allowing what's always in the back of your mind to come to the front, but just realizing that your child has fallen in love with someone different than you. We did not finish the class on that issue. It's still being talked about in a little group mail that they still have. So I would just tell you, it's not an easy nut to crack. So the rest of the time is yours. Please say whatever you want to say or whatever we didn't cover.
Well, I got 2 girls, and of course, I'm always going to say no to anyone they bring home because I'm a dad. But yeah, I mean, it comes with trust and respect. I raise them the best way I can so that I feel respect for them. I can trust them, and that's all we can do in life.
Absolutely.
Now, I mean, you know, I like every type of food ever invented, so
that's Mikey.
Not much of a discouragement to me.
I don't think you eat chitlins though, Dan. I mean, I don't. I just the smell of them is just terrible. Woo! Lord.
I agree completely with what Dan says. I have a daughter who will be 18 next month, and it's challenging. And yes, you know, no one would be good enough regardless of anything. So, but yes, I think it has far more to do with the unique qualities of that person than, you know, race or whatever. I'll also note that my sister is married to a Black man, and what I worry about for her and for them is the ugliness that they have to experience in this world. That's what I worry about. I don't worry about the fact that, you know, he's a different race. I just know that the world can be very ugly and very dark. And I hate to see them experience that. That's what I hate.
Try being Black and not having a white spouse, just simply being Black. We experience it every single day of our lives. Every day. There is no day that we don't run up against some barrier simply because of the color of our skin or some other characteristic that someone has painted on their forehead that is a bad thing. Your sister and her husband, at least they have each other. When you're in it by yourself, it's a fight.
I don't have any children, so it's really hard for me to imagine this at all. I think, though, thinking about things lately, like when I hear our new president talking about people forgiving each other and hearing each other's side, the type of people perhaps that, you know, refuse to wear a mask and think it's all a conspiracy theory. If someone I truly loved was marrying that person, that would be very hard for me to accept. I'm not sure how I would deal with someone that I ideologically thought was doing things that are very bad. That would be for sure challenging for me to accept, and I'm not sure how I would handle that. I don't think I would have a problem with someone different than me in a lot of dimensions, but I'm sure I would find areas where it did bother me. And that, I know that would be one of them. Political spectrum differences could be very hard for me to take. Just trying to imagine if I had a child and they married someone whose personal beliefs were diametrically opposed to mine. I don't know how I would handle that.
Yeah, I feel the same thing. I have a son, much like Andy and Karen said, like I would worry more about the bad time that he was going to have. Uh, Not the bad time that he was going to have, but like if I always think about like my wife had asked me at one point, like, what would happen if our son was gay? I'd be like, well, I wouldn't want that for him because he's going to have a hard time, but I would accept him. And she was like, no, you can't like not want it for him. Like you got to want what he wants. It's like, yeah, that's exactly right, and that's a spot where I need to grow. But in the back of my mind, it's like, well, it's not that I care one way or the other. I just want him to have like a good childhood and not be bullied and not have to put up with that stuff. But really, what I should be wanting is just for him to be happy with whoever he is, and it really shouldn't matter to me. Like I should just be supportive, no matter what. That said, I would have a very hard time if it was like a super political, the opposite politics that we have. That would be very hard because I think that goes into a lot of like family values and things. But it's hard, and I think we just got to be loving and supportive.
But I think this goes back to exactly what we were talking about, power. So what you all just described was power, right? You thought about what's terrible about the person of another ideology or ethnic background. What the pain would be that someone that was close to you would experience. But that's power. That's simply power. Some people call that white privilege and all this thing, but it's simply that. I mean, when our sons and daughters marry a guy who has been in jail for 30 years, can't get a job, is constantly doing something, we don't think, well, we want our child to marry, somebody who's got this. We want our children to be happy. And unfortunately, if the person you picked doesn't make the parents happy or the surrounding family happy, that's only belongs to the two of them. I think all of us have been in relationships long enough to know that's not a cakewalk. It's hard to be in a relationship with somebody. I mean, you're two diametrically opposed people who found commonality and came together. But most times it's a struggle on ideologies. Like my husband is a spendthrift and I try to spend every penny I get before I can get it. My problem going to the mall to buy it, but and somehow or another we work it out. But if you think about that, whether that person is going to have a hard time, you've made an assumption about society. You made an assumption about what's going to happen to them because they've affiliated with X, or whatever X may be. That's power, because you can actually sit down and think that out well enough to say, oh, well, this would not work out well for my family member if they did this, so.
Well, but you do have to make assumptions on some things. I mean, every day we make assumptions about things, and it's impossible to avoid making some assumptions. And I think in those cases, it's based on a lot of what we've seen and experienced. We don't want it to be that way, but it's still based on something that we've seen or experienced.
But why hasn't it changed? So when did slavery end? When did Abraham Lincoln emancipate? When have we had the civil rights movement? Why are these still things in the 21st century topics of concern? Because we, and that's a collective we, as a society, has not found anything too egregious about it to change it. Because if it was, we wouldn't be thinking about this. And just so you know, there's a study, I think you all have heard me talk about this, the browning and the graying of America. The largest growth population in the world is mixed race families. They're outpacing Hispanics, any other group, they're outpacing them, miles and miles. So why aren't we fixing it if we know that this thing does exist?
It's an excellent question. I ask myself the same thing all the time. It's incredibly frustrating. And, I think back to when I was 18 many years ago, and, you have this mindset that you're going to change the world, or the world is going to change, or that, there is no question things will be better in X decades than they are now. And it's incredibly discouraging to realize after multiple decades that we're still fighting the same battles. And your questions are somewhat rhetorical in that I don't know what the answers are.
But it's necessary for you and you collectively as a society to find out what they are and not sit around and talk about it. What you just said, my question was rhetorical. It's a question that's lived on in infamy. It's been around for a long time. Why do we still have racism? Why do we still discriminate against religion? Why do we just discriminate against women and gay people and whatever else? Why? Because it's easy. It's where we feel comfortable. So yes, it might be rhetorical, but until you put teeth in your policy, you're just talking. And that's all you're doing is talking. So if all of you are CIOs and you start your organization, so we know how this is going to be built, right? You're going to bring the people along that you know and you trust and you know their work ethic, right? But then whatever's left over out there in your little crumbs, who's coming to those jobs, right? And so that's how we keep repeating the cycle over and over and over again, because we're comfortable hiring someone that's white, we're comfortable hiring somebody that's a white female, an Asian male, an Asian female. But then when we get further down that color spectrum, yeah, not so much.
You know, that is one of the things that actually I appreciate about working at Duke. I've worked on a lot of very diverse teams. My boss now is Black. My CIO is a woman in tech. Things like that give me hope. And I think, you know, that we do need to build diverse teams and make welcome spaces for diverse viewpoints, and that will make a difference in the world. I think these interracial families will make a difference in the world as that demographic grows.
Well, I thank you all very much for chatting with me today. I want to remind you to listen to Drew and my podcast, Eminent Technology. You'll learn a little bit about Drew and a little bit about me. You also learn a little bit about our viewpoints and the people we chat with. So I thank you all for joining me today. I will send you all the link to this chat when it converts, and you can tell me whether I may upload it or not. And I really appreciate this. And it's interesting to talk to most of you because I've done a diversity chat with everybody but Andy, and to hear you're still where you were when we chatted last. I really appreciate that very much. So thank you.
Thank you,
for setting
Rochelle.
this up, Rochelle.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Nice
Y'all
seeing
stay
everybody.
well. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Safe.